And I'm live. Hi, this is Dr. Cynthia Elise Smith, and I am an anti racism and anti white supremacy essayist and educator. I'm going to do an essay today that is an examination of a question that I know everybody has asked from one time or another. And it's called, Why Do White People Hate Black People So Much? It's an interesting question, and it has any number of circular referencing that goes along with it. But I'm going to read this essay from a different perspective. And as many of you know who have followed my essays and my video and my written essays, you know I am going to dive deep, and I'm going to consider the question from a a perspective that you might not have ordinarily considered. Now, you know I do. People say, I didn't think of that. Well, this is what I want you to do today. So I want you to put your thinking caps on, put on your critical thinking white supremacist lenses because you're going to need it to understand it. And I will begin. Why do white people hate black people so much? Now, before I begin, I want to just make sure that I can be heard. So I'm going to turn this volume way up. Okay. Why do white people hate black people so much? This question is as old and worn as the variety of attempted answers to it. There are as many answers to the reason why as the number of people in the world, and renders the question as irrelevant and even flawed. Now, why do I mean irrelevant and flawed, you might ask? Well, at this point in our history, the question why is not relevant because there are many black people who frankly don't even care for the answer anymore. Still many who think they know the right answer already, and most who believe the question itself is an abomination, not even worthy of an answer. Furthermore, if you ask any white person, you will get any number of answers on a spectrum from, I don't hate black people, to, I hate black people because they are thugs, lazy, or insert epithet. It is flawed because no answer to this question could ever be born out of any real association with black people, since most black people with negative opinions, most white people with negative opinions about black people have never lived around or associated with black people in the first place. Even those who have had a cursory experiences working with or living around black people have no actual idea why, except what is presented to them via institutional media and entertainment sources. Indeed, this particular institution where racism is used to create the form and substance of public opinion has done a real number on black people over the generations through entertainment of various kinds, and certainly since the inception of radio and the motion picture industry. Pick a generation and you will find black people depicted in some of the worst ways imaginable based on the music played, news media accounts of crime, movies, and television. But if there was any one question to ask relative to the hatred of white people toward black people, what then? What then would be the best one to ask in order to gain insight into this malevolent phenomenon? Well, you know me. So after much consideration and critical thought into the kind of question that would be the most insightful, this one emerged to be the best. And I want you to hear it, and I want you to pay close attention. This is a teaching moment, which all of mine says pretty much teaching moments, but this one is a good one. The question is when? Not why, but when did white people begin hating black people so much? When exactly did this hatred start? In order to understand why, it is first necessary to gain an understanding about the foundation and the root that was laid at the core in order for the roots to grow and spread. Are you getting that? Let me say that again. It is first necessary to gain an understanding about the foundation and the root that was laid at the core in order for the roots to grow and spread. In order for this behavior to have persisted for so long, there would have to have been a beginning, a catalyst, some event or circumstance to precipitate an animus that has lasted for 400 years and counting. Therefore, as is the case with each and every behavior, feeling, idea, and representation today, with regard to race, racism, white supremacy in America, the answer to when white people began hating black people so much can be determined by examining the history of America and the idea of whiteness as superior, which could be and was weaponized by the wealthy white landowners to placate the masses of poor white people in the earliest days of America as colonies of England. According to various historical accounts, wealthy landowners encouraged racial animosity of whites toward blacks and made a distinction between freedom and enslavement. This distinction was specified in explicitly racial rather than religious terms. Prior to 1667, you may or may not be aware, proving one's conversion to Christianity could spell freedom. Therefore, what they did to eliminate that was they created laws to remove religion as a pathway to freedom. Other important laws provided additional distinctions as differences between the white servant and the black slave. By encouraging animosity between blacks and whites using these distinctions of freedom and enslavement, of race and color, white servant, black slave, they were creating an atmosphere of superiority for the poor whites. Perhaps the most pivotal act distinguishing poor and indentured whites from black people, free and enslaved, was in 1680 when the Virginia Assembly enacted a law which prevented any black person or other from raising a hand to any white person. Let me say that again. In 1680, the Virginia Assembly enacted a law that prevented any black person or other from raising a hand to any white person. This law essentially provided impunity for poor whites and white servants when abusing enslaved black people, and stripped those enslaved black people of any right of self-determination or self-defense. Here, they created protections for poor white people, essentially providing a mechanism for expressing their animus by abusing the enslaved black people and by eliminating the right of any black person to defend him or herself. While the laws of today, I need you to pay special attention to this. While the laws of today with regard to redress and self-defense are supposed to be universal and applied equally and equitably, we see today that the generations old behaviors persist, from the white vigilante to police officers, with no real right to defense or redress for black people. In essence, today, they still believe they can behave in aggressive ways with impunity toward black people. It was also easy to apply the concept of whiteness and blackness to physical bodies and profess the superiority of whiteness through already established definitions of white in religion and elsewhere. Whiteness and religion, primarily Christianity, and especially as practiced by so-called evangelicals in America, is persistent in its belief in a white deity and obedience to it. Now, the Encyclopedia Britannica references between 1660 and 1690, leaders of the Virginia colony began to pass laws and establish practices that provided or sanctioned differential treatment for freed servants whose origins were in Europe. That means if you were white and an indentured servant, there were laws put in place for differential treatment for them. They conscripted these poor whites with whom they had never had any interest in common. Now, I have to spell that out because you need to understand, because there was nothing in common between these poor white people and the rich white landowners. Nothing in common. Now, what they did, though, they didn't have any interest in common, but they put them into the category of quote unquote free men. Now, this category of free men was the category that these white wealthy landowners had placed themselves in. So they put these poor whites in the category of free men and made land, tools, animals, and other resources available to them. Now, I know a lot of you understand that part. You remember, you know that this is what happened. This is what they did. This was all part and parcel of the conditioning and indoctrination. African Americans, mulattoes, and American Indians, regardless of their cultural similarities or differences, were forced into categories separate from whites. Historical records, now you have to listen to this because this is so important. Historical records show that the Virginia Assembly went to great extremes, not only to purposely separate Europeans from Indians and Africans, and this is the part I want you to pay special attention to, but to promote contempt on the part of whites against blacks. The wealthy landowners knew that simply declaring superiority based on color would not last as long as the poor whites were being subjugated by their imposed class caste system. So they gave them the category of free and provided them with resources to protect their own interests, since they shared no real interest with the poor whites. What is interesting is the fact that the Virginia Assembly went to great extremes to promote contempt on the part of, specifically, whites against blacks. This represents, now I want you to understand, this is what represents the genesis of the hatred that would last some 400 years and more. Now, thinking people already know that the proliferation of the animosity over the centuries was aided by assistance through the various forms of entertainment available, all the way through the advent of radio, motion pictures, and other forms of entertainment media. Consequently, in examining the question of when white people started hating black people, it can be reasonably deduced as having started as early as the 1600s, when the wealthy white landowners used their common skin color for no other reason than to mollify poor and quote unquote regular whites by differentiating them from the enslaved by color and status of free and slave, separating them, and then by encouraging animosity, even going through extreme lengths to promote contempt for black people. Therefore, if asking why white people hate black people without first asking the when will never really answer the fundamental question, but understanding the when provides an inescapable rationale for the reasons why it persists to this day. This means, at some point, however, white people will have to decide whether they are still willing to continue to follow a manufactured and sustained lie of superiority coupled with continued animosity and contempt handed to them so long ago by people who really had nothing in common with them except for their skin color, and who, in reality, only gave them privileges and status to keep them compliant and obedient within their own oppressive state. Now, that concludes this essay. And I'm really interested to see who may have interest or questions. I do see that there are a number of people who got on, and thank you. I want you to feel free to share this video once it's uploaded. It will be on my YouTube channel with all the little bells and whistles and graphics and whatnot that I usually put on once it gets to YouTube. You can also, you'll be able to see it on my website, read it on my website at www.clese-writer.com this month, next month in June. I'm going to upload it. I have a few of them. I might upload like 2 or 3 essays this month. I've been kind of busy up in the head. So let me look and see who's in. Okay. Hello. Hi, Bruce. Hi, Thais. How you doing? Hey, Pat. Hi, Deb. Michael Gamble came in. Amai Williams. John Medeiros. I hope I pronounced these names right. Hey, Jesse James. Shebu Ali Muhammad. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Yes, something they refuse to teach in schools to our young students. Exactly. But see, this is, I always try to include history when, hold on one second, let me get some water. I always try to include history when I'm offering perspectives, because you can't, see, people always especially when they're talking about black people and racism and white supremacy and enslavement. With regards to black people, black people we generally will try to push back from any references to the way that we behave today, or what goes on in our heads internally. We try not to. We will push back if somebody says, well, it's as a result of the enslavement, or it's because it's got slave on or whatever, and people will back away from that. But see, what you have to understand is you just have to change that kind of thinking to understand that everything goes back to the way that it was. You have to understand where you came from in order to navigate and move forward. We live in a linear world. Our time on this earth is linear. You have your past, that's 2020. You can see, you can understand for yourself personally, individually, how your life has progressed. So you have to understand as a collective, you also need to understand the history of how everything progressed. So when you ask that question, why? All you got to do is go back into history and find out where it began. See, you don't want to let yourself be stuck in that proverbial what came first, the chicken or the egg argument. That's circular. You'll never find your answer. You'll never understand. And you'll be chasing your tail, trying to figure it out. And you can't just go by what's going on today. Because what's going on today happened 60 years ago. And what happened 60 years ago happened 100 years ago. And what went on 100 years ago went on 200 years ago. So that's why it's important to pay attention to history in order to find out what's going on today. Oh, hi, Eric. Great instructions. Hi, Michael Gamble, Ellen. Hi, you guys. I'm glad you guys are on. Please feel free to share. I want you to ask me some questions. I want you to talk about this because I know at least one of you have, if you didn't ask somebody else that question, you posted that question, you asked yourself that question, and nobody seems to have the answer. But I'm here to tell you that the answer is not why, it's when. The answer is found in when. When did they start? Then you know the why. They started back then because they were made to believe that they were superior. They were given some trinkets, some land, some resources. All because they shared the same skin color with people that could care less whether they really lived or died. And when you consider the fact that some of these indentured servants were going to lose their jobs or had lost their jobs to the enslaved that they could get for free, it was kind of easy to promote the contempt and animosity. Think about, you know what? Let's think about today, right now. Let's think about the contempt and animosity that a lot of white people have right now because of the level of violence in the protests. Now, then as now. Well, I won't say back in 1600s, there wasn't no TV, radio, movie. But today, there's a means, the media, whether it's movies, TV, radio, news, they will depict for you, for your edification, protesters protesting very calmly, serenely during the day as all the good white people who were out there. And granted, real happy. Real happy. More than it used to be. I'm 66. I know for a fact. Because back in the 60s, you weren't seeing that many. You might have seen one on the arm of Martin Luther King or something like that. Okay? But it wasn't in droves like you see today. So that's a good thing. But this is what the media, which is an institution, which is part of the racist structure, will show you that. And then they'll show you nighttime with the dark. Remember that? Dark with the fires and the smoke and the running and the looting And what do they show you? Black people. That's what they're going to show you. I ain't lying. You know that's the facts. You know that's the truth. Because you're seeing it. So you have to understand, and I made a post about this not too long, about a few minutes ago, about the fact that they're not the only person who well, I won't say the only person, because they are starting to talk about the infiltration of extremist groups. But again, the media is very careful about who these extremist groups are who are infiltrating these protests. It is no secret, probably by now, that white supremacist groups have been they've been having wet dreams over race war. And they're very opportunistic. And they have infiltrated. But you're not going to hear that in the media. You're going to hear extremist groups. Then you get Barr, who gets on television and says, leftist extremist groups like the Antifa types. Okay, those are leftist groups. Now, whether or not they're working on behalf of black people remains to be seen, because a number of these groups have their own agenda. A number of these white groups on the left side have their own agenda, and it has to do with the economics, and it has to do with politics more than the fact that George Floyd died. So you got the right wing and you got the left wing. Ask yourself this question. Why is it in Minneapolis, when they imposed the curfew and brought in the National Guard, did they stand down the night that they claimed they were going to enforce the curfew? Why did they not enforce the curfew and let things burn? Ask yourself that question. I have my suspicion, and that suspicion is because some of those quote unquote extremist groups were state sanctioned. Some of those extremist groups were the same extremist groups that stormed the capitals because they wanted to be able to get their hair cut and they wanted to be able to swim at the beach. So I just need you to understand that the same thing that's happening today is the same thing that happened before. This is a carbon copy of the flashpoint during the 60s. And during the 60s, the black leaders worked with the liberal white leaders at the time to come up with something. And that something turned into economic apportionment of opportunity with regard to employment, education, and housing. And that is where it stopped. And the reason why I say that is where it stopped is because the fight was about equality, equity, opportunity, and justice. What we got was an economic apportionment, a limited apportionment of opportunity in housing, employment, and education. They forgot about the overall equity and equality and justice pieces or pillars. And this is why you see today what you're seeing, because we never got the justice piece. See, white supremacy is not just economic, socioeconomic. White supremacy is all encompassing in every aspect, and racism is the tool to support and sustain it. You got to start thinking in terms of the behavior necessarily not being racist. The behavior is white supremacist, and it's the behavior that is being supported by the system that allows them to behave the way that they do. Because that supervisor that doesn't give you that promotion is because they know that the system will support their behavior. And because they don't give you that promotion is because they are discriminating against you, because God forbid you should look in any way better than that white person that wanted that job too. There's another little thing I want to talk about too, and then I'm going to go. But I wanted to talk about this because I was talking about this with my son. I'm going to digress just a little bit because I want to talk about this whole idea of superiority. They say that people who look like me and are the gender I am are the most educated. I'm here to tell you, if you don't know, you better ask somebody. Because I'm just right up here, I scare myself, okay? Just understand, trust and believe, I scare myself sometimes. So I know I scare a whole lot of white people. My mother used to always tell me, if you had a brain, you'd be dangerous. Well, damn it, I'm dangerous today. I'm dangerous today. And see, this is the thing. Black people have had to be better. We have had, and I am talking generally now. Because black people have had to, we know this scroll, we know the whole tune. Black people have had to jump higher, run faster, be better, just to get looked at. I'm not talking about recruited. I'm not talking about anything other than the fact that we've had to be better. We had to achieve where white people, and I'm going to say this generally, have really not had to do that. This is why all this stuff is like getting with them. It's like, oh my God, I just can't understand it. They have never really had to think about any of those things. And when you're being constantly pumped, meritocracy, oh, it's all about your achievement and merit. But then they don't tell you that they have a foot on the scale of black people so that they can't do that, so that the competition is only between you guys. But you guys don't have to really do all that much because you are the skin that wins. But black people have had to work really, really, really hard. So, no wonder this system is in place to deny and just to apply limited apportionment in terms of economic, housing, educational opportunity. Because if we went by your definition of superiority, all we need to do is look at the examples that you have allowed to be shown in entertainment. I mean, God knows, I know there have to be hundreds and thousands and thousands and thousands of excellent doctors and lawyers and other professions that we don't hear about. But in that one institution where you do allow us to see, which is entertainment, they're superior. Those black people are superior. Serena Williams. But I digress. Anyway, let me look at some questions. Hold on one second, because I got a couple of questions. Oh, whoa, okay. Let me go all the way back. Good evening, hello, 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 hello. Okay, the advent of whiteness in the colonies in the 1600s, that is right. Something they refuse to teach in schools. Exactly right. Oh my God, you're watching from Italy. Shaibu. Oh, gee, I wish I knew how to say hello in Italian. So glad I met you in that crazy ass group we got kicked out of. Yes, Thais. Yeah, that was a crazy group, wasn't it? Yes, it was. And I didn't actually get kicked out. I left. I left the group. Yeah, it was bogus. It was really bogus. Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Okay, let me see if I can get a question. Good instruction. Thank you. Sharing this, I've been so enlightened. Thank you. Good. That's my thing. You know, I posted something and somebody said, "Damn, damn, damn. I didn't know this." And this had to do with I'm not sure what post it was, but I responded back and I said, "Well, that's what I do. I approach things from perspectives that you don't ordinarily think about." And why? Because it makes you think. That's the purpose. I'll go way out on a limb, like I did with my essay on Biden's code. Um, but I do it because I want you to think. I want you to think, and in order to make that brain start turning, I hit you with something, and you go, "Well, wait a minute, what's she saying?" She's saying it's more important that when did they start hating us? It's more important when than why. Well, you got to know the when before you can even understand the why. And this dynamic continues. I'm so good. Thank you. The thank yous are great. I want you to share, share, share. What happens is because of the way that Facebook is and YouTube also, um, if you are not always commenting or at least acknowledging through the emojis, this information does not get out. I am thankful that I'm beginning to see responses to subscriptions. I'm beginning to see people subscribing to the website. That's important. I keep adding things. I've added something called expressions. I have, I think, wait a minute, one, two, I think I have 4 or 5 featured writers on there now. I have a book of the month. I'm going to keep adding things. I'm very seriously considering, and I'm working on that toward having a an interview series. I do have someone that I do believe I'm going to have lined up who has agreed. She's an excellent writer, but I'm working on having that. You know how you have like the Zoom, but I'm not going to use Zoom. I'm going to use a different type of software, and I'm so that I can call and people can call in and things like that. Anyway, so that's coming down the pike. Eventually, I'll have like a special members area, and I might, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that yet, but because I don't know, and maybe on that you might be able to do your own thing, but I'm not sure how I'm gonna set all that up yet. Well, hey, Eric, how you doing, Eric? Eric, I have on my website. I have a book of the month. Every month there is something. Um, I if you look for my group, the doctor is in. Um, you'll see the book of the month as well. In fact, the book of the month for May. Hold on one second. I will tell you. I'll tell you the books that I've already. Hold on one second. I'll tell you the books that have already been books of the month. For January, it was Slave Nation, how slavery, how slavery, how slavery in the United Colonies and sparked the American Revolution. In February, it was, that was by Alfred Bloomrosen, Slave Nation. How Slavery United the Colonies and Sparked the American Revolution by Alfred Blumrosen. In February, it was White Trash, The 400-Year Untold History of Class in America by Nancy Eisenberg. That book was interesting. It's kind of big and textbooky, so you might want to join Audible and have it, and so it can be read to you, unless you like turning those pages. In March, it was How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, and he was the author of Stamped from the Beginning. Now, what I can do is, if you look at my page generally, I will post this list and I'll tag you on it, okay? In April, it was The Condemnation of Blackness, Race, Crime, and the Making of Modern Urban America by Khalil Gilbrand Muhammad. In May, for this month, and this month's almost over, it's The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide by Carol Anderson. And in June, I am planning on having, well, you know what? I'm not going to list June. Get on my website and find June. www.celis-writer.com. Get on my website and subscribe. Okay. Eric Bixson says, I'm white and I believe that whites need to wake up and realize that it's the ruling class, the rich versus the working class. I believe that we as whites need to start educating other white people and actively be allies, since the system is based on white supremacy. Okay, see, this is the thing, and I want you to understand this. I want you to put on your thinking cap for this one, Eric. It's not about just class, because class is about economics and finance. But understand that the reason why you see it through that lens is because that is the nature of your subjugation if you're in America. Okay, and I just want people to understand, I'm not talking about the world, I'm talking about this country. So when people want to overgeneralize and speak in the abstract about these issues, I say go right ahead, because there's tons of stuff on that. But I'm concentrating on us right up in here, in this country. Okay? Because white people can only see themselves through the lens of economics, through their economic white class caste system, they can only view discrimination from that vantage point for black people. This is why when white people see black people achieving economically, they wonder to themselves, well, what are they talking about? What are these black people complaining about? They have nice houses, they have nice cars. What you need to understand is that the system of racism does not only subjugate black people in that arena, in economics, but it subjugates us in the criminal justice law piece. That institution, law and criminal justice. This is why you see what you see when you see this policeman feel that he has impunity in killing this black man on video. Because justice does not exist for us in the same way. We are subjugated in the area of justice, law, criminal justice, and anything that has to do with it. Okay? We are subjugated in education. That is also an institution where we are subjugated. We're subjugated politically. You look at the number of people who are representative of political, who are our representatives relative to the number who are white, and you will see that the percentage is very low. Very low. We're not adequately represented politically. We are subjugated in religion. I don't even have to go there, okay? Subjugated in religion as well, okay? We're subjugated in labor and employment. We are subjugated in housing. That's a, I forget what that's an offshoot of generally, but we are subjugated in all those areas. We are basically denied or apportioned in a very limited way in every area of human activity. So you need to understand that it ain't just economics for us. You guys are subjugated economically. So it is, because if that was not the case, then that very popular and famous professor would not have been handcuffed. I have to get his name. Handcuffed and taken to and arrested for trying to get into his own home. Okay? If that were the case, I really don't like using her as an example, but Oprah wouldn't have had her maids close their doors and not allow her to go in and buy a $25,000 purse that she could have bought, and she could have bought the whole store. So, I hope you understand that. That's not just economics, okay? What messed up Bernie, this is just my own, this is my opinion, and you can either like my opinion or dislike my opinion, and this is not necessarily truth. It's just my opinion. I think what screwed Bernie up is that Bernie was using the white-centered subjugation of blacks and whites, and he thought that that alone would be enough. Economic subjugation. He thought that that alone would be enough to bring everybody together, but that ain't enough. See, because we're still suffering through injustice, because we never got that in the 60s. You see what I'm trying to say? We never got that taken care of. We never got equity. They tried. They tried with affirmative action. But that got turned all twisted and topsy-turvy because it became... Now, we already knew we had to jump higher and run faster. But it got twisted, turned upside down so that it was made to look like we were obviously inferior. But these employment opportunities were going to us, and these educational opportunities were going to us because we were black. So the more qualified white person was being mistreated and discriminated against. That's where you get reverse discrimination. When really all affirmative action was supposed to do was to be some sort of redress for generations of discrimination against us, where they just didn't even bother to hire us. We were denied. So when we had our limited apportionment of Employment Opportunity Act signed, they call it the Civil Rights Act, but I call it the Limited Apportionment of Opportunity Act. And then in 1968, they extended it to include a limited apportionment of housing opportunity. So education and employment. When they did that, affirmative action was only meant that they would, and this only meant contractors, government contractors and employment and companies with 50 or more employees. That's only meant them. And it was just recruit. Just maybe take the time to recruit one, or maybe even two a year. And then maybe out of those people that you recruit, maybe you hire one that year or two that year. That's all it was about. It was supposed to be some form of redress or equity applied. But that got screwed up. But anyway. So, and we didn't get equality. We still haven't. We haven't been, equality hasn't even been applied to the limited apportionment of opportunity that we got. White people with guns being allowed to scream in police officers' faces. Yes. Well, see, white supremacy itself is not the systemic tool. Racism, and this is Thais. Thais, this is why it's my mission to help people to understand and differentiate the two things, because people are so busy making racism individual, and the powers want you to do that. They want you to make racism individual. They want you to say it's about hate. It's about not liking people. And then that way they can also say, well, black people are racist too because they don't like us. They get mad at us, and because they black, they didn't blah 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 blah. Okay? Here's the thing. White supremacy creates the behavior. The system of racism sustains the behavior. So when you say these gun white people with guns and everything they get, that's because they are part of, and they are state sanctioned. They're allowed. They're okay. You want to know why black groups are not treated the same as white groups? You have it right there. You have the answer. And racism is the tool to make sure that that behavior and that mindset and that ideology stays put, stays intact. Oh, thank you, Thais. Hello. Hi, Michael. How are you? Oh, that's okay, Tan. Um, I'm still looking for your essay. I know you had the last thing you left me with was that you had to edit it. You got, what's today? Today's 10/11. You got tonight and tomorrow to make the deadline. Otherwise, it'll go into July's. But I'm not giving you any no worries because it will get in. Trust me. Oh, I didn't know. You know that I didn't know that. Thank you, Michael. I did not know that ciao was for hello and goodbye. So ciao. I already know about SteamYard. That's actually what I'm using. I'm trying to determine whether I'm going to uh, buy the membership, which lets me record without recording live and allows me to do a number of things. There are a number of other ones out there too that I'm actually examining. But I have looked at SteamYard. Henry Louis Gates was the professor arrested for getting into his own. There you go. Thank you, Thais. That's right. And how many others? So economics has nothing to do with the subject. Well, I won't say economics in terms of our shared experience. There, I always say intersectionality is a real myth, because even when you try to connect the economic subjugation of white people with the economic subjugation of black people, it kind of goes like this, because the subjugation is so much greater for black people than it is for white people. And you can think of in terms of that, you can think in terms of the wealth gap to get a better understanding or insight into that intersection that kind of goes like this. It don't quite get like that. Okay, Chan says, while the racist framework still exists to support white supremacy, things like affirmative action won't create equity because they don't want to create equity. There you go. That's exactly right. Because equality, equity, opportunity, and justice, equality, equity, opportunity, and justice, those are the four pillars of white supremacy. And they have to be sustained. The denial and see, because before 1964 it was complete denial. It was just denial. After 1964 it became limited apportionment. Hey, Ryan. Not only will they teach, well, only not teach us this in school. This is not going into any history, but actually, everything that the things that I got, you'll be able to get the links once you go on my website and see the essay in June when I put it up. There, it is in the books. They bank on short memories and and complacency. This is what helps to sustain it as well. Complacency. Okay, I will. I certainly will, Michael. Um. Oh, okay. I typed it up today. Okay. Now, is there any? Are there any other questions about what I was talking about in terms of the why and the when did white people start hating us? Um, do you understand the reason why now? Because you understand when. I'm very interested to find out what you think. So let me know. I'll be very interested to know what you think. You know, we've got this new. Hold up. We've got this new thing, this new way of doing videos on. Oh, geez, whiz. Hold on. We've got this new thing, this new way of doing. Oh, wait a minute. I see it now. The end live video used to be right on the front so you could see it, but now it's off to the left. So it's hard to see it. Hope you like my cap. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see where it says end live video. If there are no other, okay, John says excellent perception to attain on the matter when and to yeah, yeah. Well, of course, it's a perspective that people don't really think about because and I was saying earlier how a lot of times black people will push back on any historical references to our behavior or why we think the way we do in a lot of cases and stuff. When one thing comes to mind, corporal punishment. I did an essay on that called "A Mother's Love," and how when we came over, we didn't have any concept of corporal punishment. That wasn't what we did. Children were honored. Children were not. There was no corporal punishment. That happened when we got here, and because it happened, and it happened when it happened when we got here, it was a lot of it had to do with the mother, the parents' desire to keep the slave master and his henchmen and their henchmen from beating the children, because a lot of times the children were made were used as examples to hurt the parents. So you kill a child, and that'll put the parents in line, and it'll put the other parents in line. So what the parents would do is offer to beat the children themselves. And what they were doing was what mothers would do is to save their children from being what was called spoiled, because a spoiled slave child was no good for the field or even the house. And what a spoiled child was a child who it wouldn't resonate, the meanness, the maltreatment, those kinds of, child is not born compliant to enslavement, and beating that child would strip that child of his or her dignity and everything else. And so uh, that this is they would beat the child so that the child would not become spoiled. So whatever you've learned about being spoiled today, that of course was flip, dip, trip, turned around, turned upside down to mean us being rich. It's not what it meant. And you can trace it back to the enslavement, as a number of things can be traced back to the enslavement. So you need to understand, people, everything, everything goes back, because this was the beginning of America. This is how America began. Make no mistake, this is how America began. This was part of it. This was the major part of it. White supremacy was a major, major part of it. Okay, so I don't know how many other people are. I'm not seeing any additional questions or anything. I know that there may be some people who want to go ahead and revisit this video. So I want you to know that if you put any questions into the comments after you've seen this video later, just let me know. Okay, history tells us, if Michael says, history tells us if there's prosecutor overreach, it can be a non-guilty verdict. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. That yes. Yes. And if we consider what's going on right now, they're already trying. I mentioned, I don't know how many people had understood the fact that or knew that when they gave that press conference, I honestly, in my heart of hearts, believe that they thought they had the autopsy. They thought that they had the results of the autopsy. Now, mind you, the autopsy didn't get, the body didn't go to the examiner, I'm understanding, until yesterday, and all of a sudden, bam, here are the autopsy results. But I believe that they were working very hard to get the autopsy results, because when you consider what those results turned into, they wanted to be able to get on television and exonerate that man before they arrested him. They wanted to exonerate him so as not to have to arrest him. And when it turned out that they didn't have that, that's when they stood up there and said, we wished we thought we were going to have something to talk about today. That was it, people. They were trying very hard, and this is why that other guy got on there and said, there is evidence, there may be evidence to show that what he did was not criminal. Remember that? That would have to be because they thought that autopsy was going to exonerate that murderer. Okay, so now that they don't have that, and now they've got these charges on him, and they're not first degree murder charges, they're lesser charges that will allow them to use manslaughter. And even at that, they may acquit, or the prosecutor might do just what you said. If he overreaches, they could end up acquitting the guy. And certainly they're going to use this autopsy to create what? Reasonable doubt. Because in all of this, in every single case, when we find ourselves reading the playbook, which they really haven't even tried to change it or alter it. The playbook is the same. It's just that now we see it and we understand it, and it's like, they're using the same playbook. This don't work, okay, autopsy. You know what I mean? Because how many times has the family had to go through their own expense to get the independent autopsy? Okay? So they're doing all of the same things that they've always done to justify. That's that word. That word, I may have to go and analyze. I may have to go and analyze the word justify using my lens. Using the lens, because I always go in and I try to dissect words that become racialized. And that one, that justification, justify, this is what they do. They try to justify themselves. Did you see the video of them beating him up before, though? That just came out a couple of hours ago. They may still walk, of course, but I hope it's harder now. Beating him up. Or Thais, are you talking about There's more video of George Floyd, him being beat up before he falls. I haven't seen that because I haven't been on. I haven't been on watching the news or anything like that. So if you could let me know, I would love for you to let me know. And Ryan says easily taken away or controlled by redlining. Well, that yes, that had to do specifically with the denial of opportunity. Um, that had to do with the denial of opportunity in housing. Yeah. And what they did in 1964, I mean in 1968, when they amended the Limited Apportionment Act, otherwise known as the Civil Rights Act, they um, they included housing. But even when they did that, they never did anything. That was a federal law, but the state laws and the county laws and the local laws still maintained all of the same covenants and policies. They didn't change their policies to accommodate the federal law. And what ended up happening was you had people like um, what's that dude's name? Oh God, he escapes me. Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas. Before he was the Supreme Court justice that he is today, he was the head of the EEOC under none other than Ronald Reagan, who worked vehemently to destroy and dismantle mostly all of the strides that were made prior to him getting in. And he and Nixon, but he really by the 80s, the post-racial colorblind era. By the way, I'm writing a book. Well, it's still an unbook. It's a text on the post-racial colorblind era, that time when racism turned into individual behavior, so they could hide white supremacy right behind it, and the system of racism that supported it. But anyway, as long as the murder was not premeditated or planned ahead, it can't be first degree. Well, we do know now that he knew the guy. But if you're saying pre-planned as in knowing days ahead and things like that, of course not. But you can plan it in your head at that moment, and that's what he did. He planned to kill him because at any moment he could have taken his knee off of that man, Ryan. He could have taken his knee off the man's neck. So there came a point when that decision was made to kill him. That's premeditated. That means he meditated on it beforehand while his knee was on there, okay? But of course they will argue that. But God darn it, if I was a lawyer, I was like, oh no, he premeditated. That knee was on there. Okay? At any moment he could have taken that knee off. So there became a point in his head, he said, I'm going to kill that. Okay? That's the main question. Now he did. He planned on killing that man. And he knew him from before. They had that, from what I understand, they may not have, they didn't break bread together, but they knew each other at that club where George was a bouncer, and that cop was moonlighting. And from what I understand, he was the same cop that killed George was always very nasty and crass with the and contemptuous with the black patrons, and had to be spoken to numerous times by the owner. So, among other things, this man has done. Well, listen, I have been on here for. It doesn't even tell me anymore. It used. Oh, yes, it does. You know what? I tell you, the way that this new video thing is hooked up, I kind of like it, but I kind of don't. But I've been on here for an hour now. It's interesting. Sometimes these things last 2 hours. I want to hear from you because I do want to stay on. I got like 16 of my best buddies on here. I want you to, and I want these best buddies to share. I want you to talk to me about this stuff because I frankly don't know when I'm gonna get on again. Because see, I get on when I'm in the mood. I told my husband today, I feel like I need to get on and do an essay on here. But you know how the essays always end up evolving into discussions for a while, and I'd like to have one. I don't want you guys to just be sitting here looking at me. Don't just sit here looking at me. Talk to me. Talk. Write. Tell me what's on your mind. What is on your mind? Talk to me. You got an opportunity. Okay? When I get that little video thing going, then you maybe be able to call me and ask me a question. I don't know. Oh, thank you, Ryan. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, share. Talk to me. What do you think? I don't want to read the essay again because the essay was already read. Um, but the question was, why? Why do white people hate us so much? And I examined it and determined that the question is not why, but when. And because it's important to know the when before you can even ask why, is because history teaches us lessons. And I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see how history repeats itself. There's a song that I just love. She says, it's all just little bits of history repeating. And then it's dun, dun, dun. Shirley Bassey. Look it up. History repeating. And it's the truth. It's all just little bits of history repeating. That's what it is. And if you don't know history, you don't really realize that it's repeating. And because of the internet, because of technology, you can find this stuff. But you got to dig deep. I'm willing to do that because I'm an educator. I do it for free. I'm not getting paid. This is a mission. This is a mission because I want people to wake up and understand what is going on. Okay, I got a couple of. It was so chilling, the lack of scene setting that we see in other cases. He absolutely planned it and didn't care if it was being recorded. Absolutely. He did not care whether it was being recorded. Absolutely. I think, yes, Mike. I think the fact that they work together will be an interesting part of the trial. That, whether they admit that part into the trial, remains to be seen. If they even have a trial. But they may deem that irrelevant. Why aren't the media focusing on the right wing infiltrators? You already know why. Because they're state sanctioned. They are sanctioned. All you have to do is consider how these same people can come armed to the teeth with bulletproof vests and flak jackets and bullets around their shoulders and assault rifles, literally storm the capitals of cities where some of the legislators decided to stay home because they were in fear. So they didn't even bother to go to work. And not one police officer, nothing. These people were armed. And what did our What did President Trump, had to back it up, he ain't my president. What did President Trump say? Freedom! This is your right. This is your right. Because it's sanctioned. Because white people they're only subjugated economically. They have justice. They get justice. They are equal in all other areas, and they are only subjugated economically. This is the privileges. These are the privileges. Why aren't there? Okay. Also, do we? Okay. Ryan says. Also, do we know why he decided to kill George Floyd? No, that would probably have to come out at trial. Um, if you've got, okay, we already know this man is a white supremacist, so that question could actually be answered based on what I wrote in my essay. When for generations you have been indoctrinated and actively and actively encouraged to, in your contempt for black people, when you've been in, when for generations, when your ancestors were conditioned for animosity and contempt for black people, it doesn't it doesn't really matter now why they're the way they are, because they were being indoctrinated way back then, and they're just exhibiting the same behavior. The behavior just has not changed. And so when you don't even think of a black person as a human being, and you know that you were working within a system where your particular position as a police officer who polices law and order, control of black people, then it's quite simple. He literally thought, at least until they arrested him, that he was going to get away with it. And he could still get away with it. Five years later, when we were told to wait and be patient for justice for Eric Gardner, there was no justice. Because we didn't get that in the 60s. That was not promised to us. And we didn't get it. Oh, that's one of your, mine too. That history repeating, that's one of my favorites. Even when they get busted on social media, it truly shows how racism permeates through the government. Well, politics are an institution, is an institution. Okay? And politics is how we get our government. Okay? And politics for black people and everything, all of those ancillary things that go along with politics, which is part and parcel of the government, is racist and white supremacist. Because white supremacists are running the show, whether they're Democrat or Republican, they still white supremacists. It's just that one side uses the tools of racism to a much larger degree and for more dramatic effect than the other. The other, which are the liberals, are the ones who would much rather go back to the old colorblind era where you didn't mention the word white. You just say things are normal, things are neutral. This is just the natural order of things. Education, the best education is a traditional education. People achieve. This is how merit works. You do your best, you try your hardest. And lurking around in that background while they doing all that sweet talk, the system of racism is chugging along, putting that foot on your neck, keeping you from achieving and succeeding. And in fact, you can lose your life. In the thousands of black people killed by law enforcement were killed, if the thousands of black people killed by law enforcement were killed all at once, it would be a genocide. They do this because they can. It's modern. Well, let me tell you, Tan, genocide is happening whether they kill us in mass numbers or not. And then let me tell you why. For every black person that, okay, and this is what I wrote, where somebody said, damn, 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 I hadn't thought about it that way. Um, Let me get what I wrote. Hold on a second. Just give me a minute. Just a minute, because I think that was the last thing that I posted before I actually, hold on one second. That was the last thing that I posted before I decided to get on this thing. So, okay. Um, okay, nope, that wasn't okay. I want you to listen to this, and then we'll get back to the questions. I often think about how the black population in America managed to maintain itself at approximately 13 to 14%. Then I realize, even with the addition of black Americans from other countries who aren't descendants of the enslavement, the representation, according to most reliable statistics to date, is approximately 13.4%. Now, I'm talking about 13.4% of the population of the United States. This includes men, women, and children. 13.4% of the population in these United States. And if you're thinking minority, get on my website and read my essay about that word, because that's another thing. That's another term that I'd like all of us to stop using when we're describing a black person or black people, because just like all the other words that are racialized in this racist white supremacist country, minority, when you take the ity off, means minor. The ity makes it a state of being minor. Get that essay and read it. It's all about um, navigating the language of white supremacy and racism. Because you got to know, see, you got stuff coming out of your mouths that you're not even realizing you're saying. You're supporting it and don't even realize that's what you're saying. So get that. I always, in my group, the doctor is in family practice, for every new member that all of the new members, when I list the new members, I always include that, because that is very important. I talk about, and this is my approach, and it should be yours as well, to use the 3 C's. Comprehension, that means understanding. Context, that means what is the event about, what are we actually talking about here. So many people could just take things so out of context. Stay focused, stay within the context. And connotation, that's the feel. That's when you read a word and you go, when you read the word racism, well, how do you feel? That's the feel, that's the connotation. That's how you feel about what's being said. So you apply those 3 things, okay, when you're critically thinking, and you can't lose. Okay, so getting back. So When I realized that in addition that that according to statistics we're still only 13.4%. Then, as I always do, I started deep thinking about all the murders of black men over the generation, and of those boys and men, many of whom were as young as 14 when incarcerated, who languish in prison for life without parole. These are acts of removing black, but see, and pay attention when I'm talking to you people. Pay attention to the words that I use. Words come from thoughts. Okay? In fact, my dissertation was all about that. These are acts of removing black boys and men, not only from earth, but from society as well, the ones that are left alive. Systemic racism within the institutions of criminal justice and law enforcement not only takes black lives from the earth and from society in the case of prison, but are actively and literally engaging in genocide. And apparently, the systemic culling of black men in particular is for the purpose of controlling future populations. Since generations, we're talking about. Since generations of offspring that could have been or will be born weren't and will not as a result. I have to think because the system of racism is so insidious. The structures of genocide were built right into these institutions for just that purpose. Now, for every black man or black woman who is killed or incarcerated, that's a generation. You don't need a mass amount, a mass number for genocide to occur. So understand that every black boy who is murdered, every black woman who is killed, that black woman, Breonna Taylor, I think her name was, she will never have children. Generations have been lost because she's dead. So you need to consider it from that angle. Of course, the families are devastated, and I'm not taking away from any of that. But in the bigger picture, generations are being lost. Yes, 13% Hispanics. Now, I just need you to understand, Ryan. I just need you to understand. I am talking about black people in America, the descendants of the enslavement. That is my focus, okay? I am not taken away from any other aggrieved group. But my focus is on black Americans because we are going through hell. We are going through pure hell. And I don't want to get into who's going through the most pure hell. You know, my focus is on that. Okay, I'm not taking away from what's going on in terms of Hispanics, people who speak Spanish, or Latinos, and that whole the term Hispanic, it just means people who speak Spanish. So imagine people who speak Spanish are being discriminated just because they speak Spanish. That's Hispanic. That's what that means. Latino, Latina. If you knew how many ethnicities, geographical lineage, if you knew how many different lineages and references can be made for people from different places that are, and Latino and Latina relates to South America, South and Central America specifically. Oh yeah, read that essay. Doc hit me in the head with that one the other night. Which one was? Oh, you mean the three C's? and minority. I think that's what you're talking about. Is that not what you're talking about? Okay, I'm not sure. Maybe you could type that in. Yeah, I recommend that people get on the website and read that. I would recommend you read that before you read any of the other essays that I write, because you have to have that fundamental, uh, those tools, and those tools are fundamental in order to understand and keep things within the proper context and to get the right feeling, the feeling that what I'm writing, you have to understand the feeling that's behind the writing. Alrighty. I have been on for an hour and 30 minutes now and counting, and if there are no more questions, then I will end the video. And like I said, if after sharing the video, if anybody has any comments, throw them up in that box and I will respond to them as much as I can. As a matter of fact, um oh wait a minute, here's some. Oh dag, they're coming up from the top. Oh, snap. See, I didn't know that. Hold on. Things are happening here. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm looking all at the bottom and missing everything that's going on at the top. My goodness, I didn't know there was another video. Thank you. Okay, hold on. Um, oh, geez. Let me go all the way to the top because I. Okay, here we go. Powerful message. Okay, I got that. I typed. Okay, I got that. I got that. Okay, I got that. What are your thoughts on charge from officer? Oh, got that. I got that. I have definitely. Okay. Oh, Ryan. Ryan Terry says, I have definitely asked that question over and over. So now that we are here, despite all of the obstacles, I believe this violence towards us will continue, of course, until we get justice. And when I say that, I'm not using that term loosely. Justice is a thing. Okay, that is a thing that we need to get that we didn't get in the 60s, along with that limited apportionment of opportunity in employment and in education and housing. We did not get justice, and this is why we are. This is why the things that are happening to us today then still happen to us, because they don't want to give us justice. Because if they do that, that that will that will help them. That will actually help to dismantle the whole idea of racism and white supremacy, because they can't give us equal justice with white people. They can't. They just can't do that. It's something that they just will not do, because that is a privilege. See, they only subjugate white people economically. If they give us equal justice, then that means that now we have two things that they have. That we have. There are two things that could bind us. Do you get what I'm saying? Right now, there's only one kind of sort of thing that binds us, and that's economics. If we get equal justice, that's a big thing that would bind us. And they can't have that. They would not be able to control us if we were given equal justice. You get that? There would be no need for the police the way that they have been fashioned as an offshoot of the slave patrols. The same thing. History. Read your history. The slave patrols are the genesis, and the police are just a an evolution, if you will, of those slave patrols. They were still designed to do what it is that they do. This is why there's no need to question why they do what they do. You say, I believe this violence towards will continue. We have been in a race war forever. Yeah, in a sense, in a very abstract sense. We are just waking up. Uh, in a sense. Okay, these are like things that are being said in the abstract, so I'm not going to get real particular about that. But I have felt the Willie Lynch letters have been applied to our society as a whole. Okay, Not just blacks, but everybody. Uh, no, black people. This is about black. So you have to understand, if you came in on the beginning of the essay, you would understand that this is about black and white. Because while they separated everybody according to the distinctions that they made in terms of free and slave and white and black, and they separated out the Africans and the Indians and things like that, they went to extreme lengths to foster contempt for white against black. That is a fact. They didn't say extreme contempt for this or that or the other ethnicities. They said white against black. So there is always the tendency to try to include, and that's honest, that it happens because there are, it's the evolution of in, we could talk in terms of the inclusion of discrimination. You know what I mean? It has expanded. It has. We can say that. But if you take the plight of the African American descendant of the enslavement, you will find in the statistics that we are always the worst. You know? So even in relation to those other ethnicities, by the way, they are not races, but ethnicities that are being discriminated against, they are still being discriminated against to a lesser degree. And the Willie Lynch letter, there is still some contention as to whether that was real or not. Um, and it seems like it lines up with that was established start of this nation. Well, of course it was. That goes without saying. Let's see if we do we have any other ones. I saw that one. Okay, I'm thinking that we about to. The officer is charged with third. Okay, okay. Well, in terms of the charge of third degree murder, that it apply it the application of it depends on the state and how they want to apply it, but it's supposed to be in Minnesota, it's supposed to be murder that isn't premeditated, but it is with malicious intent. um they have a word that they use for it, but it basically is murder with malicious intent. It's like, you it's when you look at what he did, you could say, okay, I mean, yeah, he may not have, if you wanted to go with, it wasn't like he planned it for days or anything like that, but once he was in that position, he decided you could use third degree murder for that. Okay. I think I got all of the questions, even when they get busted on social media. Oh, yeah, I got that one. I got that one. I think I got them all. Even without the why, it may be hard to prove it was premeditated and intentional, and it may even be harder to charge him with a hate crime. Oh, yeah, that goes without saying. It's so difficult to charge a hate crime because they put the onus on the person. They put the onus on the dead person, not the perp. And besides, that whole concept of hate crime is contrived. It's bullshit. Excuse. The whole concept of a hate crime is BS. Okay? Because they're not attacking the system that made it possible. And they're not talking about white supremacy. They're talking about hate. Yeah, white supremacists hate black people. Yeah, yeah. But that's why they can say it was something else other than white supremacy, because hate is general. You can hate somebody and what they'll say and not be racist. Well, racism is a system, so it don't have nothing to do with that individual's behavior. White supremacy has everything to do with it, but they won't mention that. And that's how they get over. Oh yeah, the murderer is married to the sister of the. Whoa, wait a minute! Don't forget Michael says, don't forget that the murderer is married to the sister of the officer that stood by and allowed his brother-in-law to commit What? Let me read that again. Don't forget that the murderer is married to the sister of the officer that stood by. Oh, snap a doodle woodle! You're talking about the Asian gentleman, the Asian police officer. Well, he wasn't general. No wonder. And now that she's left him, my thinking is that she was fearful of him, and so was he. He was a coward. I always thought that anyway, but now to know they were even related, that's deep. That's deep. Yes, ma'am, racism and white supremacy may be the reason he did it. Ironically, the same superior belief is part of the overall system. Yep, 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 yep. Yep, yep, yep. Now let's see. It's a family affair. Yeah, you're right about that. Yep. Okay. She filed for divorce today. Hey, Charles. Charles, wait until you see, and this is as an aside, Charles and Carter, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be featured in my new expressions area on the website. Because of all of because of the death of George Floyd, he was personally moved to the extent of writing a poem that is going to be featured in both the written and audio version. So when you go to the website this June the 1st, it's going to go up. And I think, Charles, you're going to be very pleased with the way that I set that up for you let me set that up for you this month. And every month there will be, hopefully, there will be something in expression. So I encourage people, I encourage writers, and I encourage people who write poems, as long as it is, if as long as the focus is on healing, and in terms of this system and the behavior, as long as it is related to the subject matter, and it fosters critical thought, I'd be more than happy to look at your work. You just drop me a line on my website. There's a place where you can drop me a line with a comment, and I will respond. And we'll see if we can get you featured on the website. I don't get any revenue from the site, so I don't get paid, so you won't get paid. But if you want your things to be featured, if you want it to be seen, and you can write, I'll be more than happy to feature you. I'm glad that she filed for divorce today. She was probably abused. Some people are writing that they can save money. How much money do they have? He's a cop in Minneapolis. Granted, he's making more than the black cops, more than likely. But they're not living out on whatever the most expensive area of Minnesota. I'm sure. I'm sure they grunting too. See, that's another misconception of people, because even though the poorest white is still richer than the poorest black, you got some poor ass white people out here, and you got more than less. They are being subjugated, people, but they've accepted it, and they accepted it way back in the 1600s, because those rich white landowners told them, look, we're going to give you this, 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 and that. And we're going to support you, and we're going to help you, and we're going to make sure that you can one day rise and maybe even get to where we are. See, that's the line they told them. That's that American dream. And the funny part is, everybody's always harping on the American dream and forgetting the fact that it is a dream. It's a dream. You wake up and you realize that it ain't real. Or you would think they'd wake up and realize it's not real. But anyway, I'm digressing. This essay was about why white people hate black people so much. And the issue is really not why, because you need to know when before you can understand why. And once you know when, then you can pretty much go, ah. How did Eddie Murphy used to go, ah, and Coming to America when he played the Jewish guy, ah, ah. There you get it. You go, okay, I got it. I got it. That's why. Because they were sold a bill of goods way back then, and they just never changed their behavior. And it got worse. And it evolved. And it evolved and evolved. So now it includes a whole host of people besides the niggers. But we still get it worse. Trust me, we still getting it worse. So anyway, with that, I'm gonna get ready and get off of here. So like I said, visit my website www.calise-writer.com. That's www.calise-writer.com. I'm Cynthia Elise Smith. The doctor was in, and now the doctor's out.